Do you think you can escape? Dusong Mangpoj inwardly sneered. He had only needed a glance to recognize Wang Chong's back. In the distance, Wang Chong seemed to sense something, his body shivering as Dusong Mangpoj's eyes locked onto him. He inadvertently turned his head to look, and those eyes that had always been so calm and wise finally revealed a tinge of deep panic and fear. In the face of absolute strength, all plans and tactics were merely the toys of children. Only great generals could deal with great generals. Wang Chong had been able to use certain methods to control Fuming Lingcha's movements, using the great general of Qixi to hold down Dusong Mangpoj. For this, Dusong Mangpoj deeply admired him. Alas, you underestimated the daring of a great general, and underestimated Fuming Lingcha's determination to kill you. For these reasons, you are bound to die here. Dusong Mangpoj grinned as he looked at the youth. To have offended so many great generals on both sides of the border was a feat that only this youth of the great Tang could have accomplished. No matter how overflowing with talent one was, anyone that was too brash and arrogant was doomed to be short-lived, cut down mid-flight. Bang! Dusong Mangpoj leapt forward, leaving countless blurs in the air. When he next appeared, he was several dozen zhang away. When Dusong Mangpoj truly began to move, he was countless times faster than a warhorse, the only drawback being that he would consume a great deal of stellar energy. Perhaps Wang Chong could have escaped if he had left right from the start, but it was impossible to escape from right under his eyes. Little friend, why are you in such a rush? It's been several months since our meeting in the capital. Let's chat about old times. Dusong Mangpoj's voice was not loud, yet it could be heard throughout the steel fortress. His body exuded a vast sea of energy that filled the fortress to the bursting, his divine strength intimidating everyone present. Cries of panic and fear filled the fortress, mixing together with the sounds of wooden and steel racks being knocked over. The 8,000 craftsmen were in chaos, and even the Wuxian cavalry that had entered the fortress were scattering. Dusong Mangpoj had originally been somewhat cautious and vigilant, but when he saw this scene, all hesitation left him. True or false, authentic or feigned panic, real fear or faked fear, an imperial great general like Dusong Mangpoj could distinguish these things at a glance. Moreover, the most important part of an army was its formation. With Wang Chong's Wuxian cavalry in such disorder, fleeing in every direction, even if they really were up to something, they were essentially crippling themselves with these actions. Once his army opened the gates and entered, even the formidable Wuxian cavalry would have their fates sealed. Rumble! Dusong Mangpoj immediately began to streak through the air like a lightning bolt, leaving a long white trail of energy as he charged toward the rear gate. Majestic stellar energy tore at the sky, the air shrieking at his passage. Behind Dusong Mangpoj, the faint image of a plateau and snowy mountains could be seen. Lightning was crackling over the plateau as a spider web of electricity in the air, constantly cleaving down at the plateau, each strike making Dusong Mangpoj's figure seem even more imposing, enigmatic, and powerful. Shadows began to emerge on Dusong Mangpoj's hand, condensing into a massive black and monstrous claw. There were many legends about the Tibetan plateau, and the Xianxia dynasty was only one of them. Before this dynasty, it was said that countless strange monsters of all shapes and sizes used to dwell on the plateau. In the end, the legends of these monsters became the supreme techniques of the Great Snow Mountain Holy Temple. Dusong Mangpoj had learned one of these supreme techniques, and this technique was one of the reasons he was able to sit firmly on the plateau, becoming one of the Yusang Empire's few imperial great generals. With no Fuming Lingcha to fear, Dusong Mangpoj needed only one strike to finish off the greatest threat that the Yusang Empire had ever faced. Young Master Wang, accept your fate. Dusong Mangpoj's voice was still echoing in the air when another furious voice butted in. That brat's life is mine. The voice pealed through the city like thunder. There was a flash of light behind Dusong Mangpoj as another muscular and divine figure appeared on the wall. That person's eyes were blazing with an intimidating light, and even at this distance, they were still capable of striking fear into any onlookers. Dian Mangban was a brigadier general and was still quite a bit weaker than Dusong Mangpoj, But in terms of desire to kill Wang Chong, Dusong Mangpoj was left in Dian Mangban's dust. Boom! Dian Mangban shot from the walls like he had been fired from a cannon. Before this operation, Dian Mangban had never met Wang Chong and was only killing him because the Tsenpo had ordered it, but now this was no longer a simple mission. Rumble. There was a metal rumbling that instantly caught the attention of both Dusong Mangpoj and Dian Mangban. They both trembled for a moment and noticed that the rear gate of the fortress had opened a sliver, and Wang Chong seemed on the verge of running out. Buzz. There was no more time to think. Both Dusong Mangpoj and Dian Mangban pushed their stellar energy to the limits, exploding through the air. Both Brigadier General and Great General moved with extreme speeds. Dusong Mangpoj was hailed as the Eagle of the Steppe, and when his identity had been exposed in the capital of the Great Tang, he had fled all the way from their back to the plateau, so one could easily imagine how fast he was. Buzz! Dusong Mangpoj's dantian exploded with energy, and he left a long trail behind him as he instantly traveled 200 zhang. With another flash, another 200 zhang had been covered. In just the blink of an eye, Wang Chong was now not even 50 zhang from him. When an imperial great general was using all their strength to chase after a single person, that was a speed that was terrifying to just think about. Dusong Mangpoj was like a shooting star, so fast that the eyes could no longer keep up. Whether it was Wang Chong and his great Yin-Yang heaven creation art, the Brigadier General Dian Mangban, or the future invincible great general, no one in this triangular gap could match Dusong Mangpoj's speed. Buzz! Suddenly, when he was only 30 zhang from Wang Chong, Dusong Mangpoj's eyes widened, and he felt a strange sensation. His eyes scanning the area, he quickly noticed two elderly figures standing by the gate. These two men didn't seem like craftsmen or foremen. One was dressed in a black robe and had a head of black hair and a grim expression. The other was dressed in a faded robe of hemp, his hair white and his expression tough and inflexible. Neither of them seemed very young, the profusion of wrinkles on their face indicating that they were at least 60. Moreover, the white-haired man had turbid eyes, so he was at least 80 years old. In this city full of nervous people fleeing in every direction, even Wang Chong running for his life, only these two elders remained still, standing to the left and right of the rear gate. Their eyes were calm, and not only were they not running, they were looking at him, apparently waiting for him to pass. They were a stark contrast to the rest of the people in the city. This is... Dusong Mangpoj's pupils constricted, and for a moment he doubted. But he quickly cast this thought to the back of his mind. No matter how suspicious these two elders were, to an imperial great general, they were no concern at all. At the most, if they dared to try and stop him, he would just crush them. Rumble! Behind him, the gate was opening. The white braves had scaled the walls and had succeeded in opening the main gate, allowing the tens of thousands of Tibetan cavalry to surge in. At this stage, the Tibetans had finally won. Hearing the roars behind him, Dusong Mangpoj no longer hesitated. The stellar energy in his dantian erupted as he rushed toward the rear gate. He could see that Wang Chong wasn't very far now. As long as he could kill this young marquis, he could complete the Tsenpo's mission and wash away Yusang's humiliation. What an arrogant Tibetan! At this moment, the black-robed elder to the right suddenly spoke. He's just at the peak of the Saint Martial realm. I can't even count the number of experts of his level that I've killed. Does a junior of 40-some years of age really think that no one can hold him down? His eyes were cold, and even someone of Dusong Mangpoj's cultivation level couldn't but feel a chill in his heart. Brother Zhang, do not blame him. The white-haired elder on the left began to move his lips as well. Yusang is far from the Central Plains, so it is very normal that he does not know about how Brother Zhang wreaked havoc on the sects, how so many people would pale in fear at the mention of your name. The young marquis has come this time with the intent of vanquishing Yusang and resolving the Great Tang's troubles. Although I am aged, if I am able to assist the Great Tang and the people of the Central Plains, then I would be willing to die 10,000 deaths. Let us assist him by taking care of this problem. When this pair began to speak, Dusong Mangpoj instantly felt a very eerie and bizarre feeling. As a peak Saint Martial realm expert, Dusong Mangpoj could travel vast distances in the blink of an eye. In normal circumstances, These people shouldn't have even been able to finish saying a word, much less spit out whole sentences. But not only had they managed to finish their thoughts, there had even been time for the one on the right to speak first and the one on the left to follow him. This was the first time Dusong Mangpoj had ever encountered such a bizarre situation, and he felt like he was seeing ghosts. But the most shocking thing of all was yet to take place. Rumble, like an extremely dangerous beast from prehistory tearing off its disguise and revealing its true face, an inconceivably powerful energy began to explode from the black-robed elder on the right. Never in Dusong Mangpoj's life had he encountered a situation like this. He basically recognized all the imperial great generals of the world, but he did not recognize this black-robed elder. However, the energy bursting from that old man was ruthless, cruel, and suffused with a boundlessly aggressive nature. For a moment, Dusong Mangpoj felt like he wasn't looking at a human, but tens of thousands of swords and sabers exploding outward. In the heart of that explosion of swords and sabers, however, was a pitch-black hole. Bang! Before Dusong Mangpoj could react, another tsunami of energy exploded from the other side. That old and tottering white-haired elder with the inflexible expression began to rapidly rise in cultivation. True martial realm, profound martial realm, imperial martial realm, saint martial realm. In an instant, both elders had reached the peak of the saint martial realm. Dusong Mangpoj, I spared your life in our last meeting, so why haven't you learned anything? Said the Wuxiang village chief in a thunderous voice. It's you. Dusong Mangpoj's body trembled as if he had been struck by lightning, countless images beginning to flit through his mind. As he examined that aged face, he finally recognized who it was. Around half a year ago, he had mixed into the capital with the first prince, but Wang Chong had exposed his identity, forcing him to flee. He first had the first prince return to the Tibetan plateau, and then led off the pursuing soldiers by himself. At the time, he had mistakenly wandered into a mountain valley, where he had almost been killed. Dusong Mangpoj had never imagined that the mysterious elder who had defeated him in the mountain valley would show up here. The shock was so great that, for a moment, this Yusang great general showed a little consternation. Not good. Dusong Mangpoj trembled as an enormous fear seized his body. He suddenly understood why Wang Chong had been so confident, daring to step onto the plateau with only 5,000 cavalry to challenge all the Tibetans of the northern region. Dusong Mangpoj had believed this entire time that Wang Chong was relying on the Tang great general Fuming Lingcha, but only now did Dusong Mangpoj realize just how wrong he was. The flight after 2 consecutive victories had simply been a part of Wang Chong's plan. He had been relying not on Fuming Lingcha, but on these 2 monstrous old men. Everything about this, including Wang Chong attempting to open the rear gate of the fortress and flee, had just been bait to lure him out. In this battle, Wang Chong's goal had not been Dian Mangban, but a Tibetan great general. Although Dusong Mangpoj had not participated in those previous battles, Wang Chong's gaze had been fixed on him from start to finish. The Great Tang actually has such a formidable individual. With him here, our Yusang will find it very difficult to do anything in Qixi. An icy chill began to surge through Dusong Mangpoj's trembling body. He had long ago heard of Wang Chong's name, and he had also heard of the massive battle he had fought against Daluan Ruozhen and Huashu Huizong. But in the end, he had still been too dismissive. Wang Chong's cultivation was simply far weaker than his. But now, Dusong Mangpoj could finally sense just how terrifying this youth of the Great Tang was. He was terrifying not because of his martial arts, but because of his intelligence and foresight that always seemed to have control over the situation. Leave. With this thought, Dusong Mangpoj immediately began to retreat. If there were just one opponent, Dusong Mangpoj would definitely have stepped forward to fight to the death, but with 2 experts at the Imperial Great General level, he was simply no match. No single great general could deal with 2 great generals at once. This had been a trap. Ha ha ha. Dusong Mangpoj, isn't it a little bit too late to run? A roar of laughter came from the open gate. At some point, the fleeing Wang Chong had stopped and turned around to face Dusong Mangpoj. Rumble. As if in response to Wang Chong's voice, the earth quavered and time seemed to stop, after which the world seemed to explode. As countless people looked on in fear, A ball of light even more dazzling than the sun burst out from the rear gate. For a moment, the area around the triangular gap was quiet, the massive explosions drowning out all noise, silencing the screams and shouts, the crashes and hoarse whinnies. Vast amounts of light and heat, accompanied by berserk streams of energy, pressed against the walls, making them groan and crack. For the sake of toughening these walls, Wang Chong had added hundreds of toughening and defensive inscriptions within them. But these powerful inscriptions were nothing more than paper to these three supreme experts of the Imperial Great General level. They shattered, whole pieces of the steel wall being crushed and crumpled. Aya! A terrifying scream broke the silence. In front of a stunned audience, Dusong Mangpoj flew through the sky like a rag doll. Withdraw! A panicked shout rang out over the heavens. The moment Dusong Mangpoj crashed into the ground, he immediately took to his heels. Dusong Mangpoj had never felt so much unease, been in such a panic. An intense danger followed him like his shadow, saturating the air around him. Whether it was in strength, energy, techniques, or use of stellar energy, those two elders had far surpassed Dusong Mangpoj's expectations. The terror and sharpness he had felt when exchanging blows with them was simply impossible to imagine. Every bit of their stellar energy had been used to the absolute limit, particularly with that black-haired old man. His stellar energy was 3 times more effective. Thus, although his cultivation wasn't the highest of the three, he actually represented the greatest threat. Dusong Mangpoj had resided at the peak of the Saint Martial realm for 10-some years now, and he was a veteran great general, but in terms of martial arts and understanding of stellar energy, he wasn't even on the same level as the black-robed elder. Before this, Dusong Mangpoj had never imagined that someone could utilize stellar energy in such a refined and exquisite manner, reaching a level that almost seemed to be one with the Tao. In the face of such an experienced and mature expert, Dusong Mangpoj had no thought of battle, only of getting as far away as possible. You just came, and now you want to leave? An icy voice rang out from behind him, and Dusong Mangpoj felt like his soul had taken flight. He could sense that 2 storms of energy were in hot pursuit. The demonic Emperor Old Man and the Wuxiang village chief had no intentions of letting him go. Wang Chong had used a great deal of time and energy for this battle. He had requested the aid of his master, the demonic Emperor Old Man, and sent a messenger pigeon to deliver a letter to the Wuxiang village chief. This entire process had been carried out with utmost secrecy. Both the demonic Emperor Old Man and Wuxiang village chief had come in the middle of the night, completely unnoticed. Moreover, they had mixed in with the 8,000 craftsmen when entering the plateau. In the previous 2 battles, the pair had simply watched from the walls. Even when Wang Chong and Dian Mangban were engaged in pitched combat, the two showed no intention of interfering. Everything had been for the sake of drawing Dusong Mangpoj into the trap. Bang! There was a flash of light and a massive explosion. The demonic Emperor Old Man had punched, immediately unleashing an explosive wave of energy that converted the air around him into thousands of sharp swords that lunged toward Dusong Mangpoj. The myriad spirit sea art. The heavens seemed to dim as the demonic Emperor Old Man attacked, and the entire fortress seemed on the verge of breaking. At the demonic Emperor Old Man's level, every move was dazzling and accompanied by countless phenomena, no less amazing than the great Yin-Yang heaven creation art. Dusong Mangpoj was a peak Saint martial expert, so he was extremely sensitive to experts of the same level. Thus, even though Dusong Mangpoj and Fuming Lingcha hadn't been able to see each other, they could still sense each other's existence. But this move was completely ineffective against the demonic Emperor Old Man. The demonic Emperor Old Man had been able to control the energy around him, blocking Dusong Mangpoj's perception. This was something only the myriad spirit sea art could do. Rumble. Energy exploded as Dusong Mangpoj barely managed to dodge the blow. Dusong Mangpoj was pushing the supreme art of the Great Snow Mountain Holy Temple to its limit, but he was still unable to completely dodge the demonic Emperor Old Man's attack. A destructive wave of energy swept past, causing Dusong Mangpoj to roll in the air. Just when he had managed to stabilize himself and continue running, another attack streaked toward him like a comet. The Wuxiang village chief's attack had come. Dusong Mangpoj felt like his skull was going numb, and he was almost going insane as he tottered on the brink of life and death. But there was someone who was even more afraid and insane than Dusong Mangpoj. Just who are these people? Where did that brat manage to find such powerful experts? Dian Mangban's pupils had constricted while a deep despair surged through his mind. In that exchange of blows, he had sensed the appearance of two supreme experts at the Imperial Great General level. To Dian Mangban, this was like a sudden blow to his head. Although Dian Mangban was known as the Azura war god of the Yusang Empire, he was still just a brigadier general, not a great general. These two experts on the Imperial Great General level suddenly descending from the heavens on this small fort had completely overturned his understanding of the world. This was not something someone of his abilities could contend against. Run! Before the demonic Emperor Old Man and the Wuxiang village chief could reach him, Dian Mangban had turned around and fled. The two experts that Wang Chong had found were far too terrifying, existences that not even Dusong Mangpoj could handle. And if Dusong Mangpoj was no match, then Dian Mangban was certain to fare even worse. At this moment, Dian Mangban was even more frantic than Dusong Mangpoj. This can't be happening. Damn thing, how could this be? Dian Mangban's eyes were wide open, and his teeth had almost crumbled away from all the gnashing. But even though he was furious, his reaction was not one bit slow. Whoosh! Dian Mangban immediately began to rush back to the walls. Dian Mangban, where are you going? Lord Marquis has ordered that you must remain. The moment this voice spoke, Dian Mangban was surrounded by rumbling as hundreds upon thousands of stones soared into the sky. Right in front of Dian Mangban's eyes, a massive general from ancient times formed out of the stone, blocking his path. Stone General. Huang Batian had finally revealed himself, immediately using his mighty stone general. At the feet of the general, rippling halos resounded in the air. It was clear that Huang Batian had only gotten stronger since his clash with Wang Chong in Wuxiang village. Rumble. The heavens dimmed as the stone general immediately punched, the air shrieking as the stone fist thundered toward Dian Mangban. Get out of my way! Dian Mangban's expression turned savage, and a vicious light appeared in his eyes. An earth element warrior at the Imperial Martial Realm would have been barely worth a glance in the past, someone he could have heavily injured with a single thrust of his spear. But while he was fleeing for his life, such an individual was lethal. Buzz! Dian Mangban's body flickered as he attempted to move to the side and avoid the stone general. But before he could leave, Huang Batian sent a second craggy stone fist rumbling through the air toward him. This time, Dian Mangban had nowhere to dodge. Seeking death. Enraged, Dian Mangban sent out a punch of his own. Boom! The two fists of starkly different sizes crashed against each other, causing a massive shockwave. Unexpectedly, it was the massive stone general that collapsed with a yelp, the body instantly splintering apart into thousands of stone pieces. But even though he had knocked down Huang Batian with a single punch, Dian Mangban was not at all pleased. On the contrary, he felt only more despair. In the past, such an earth element warrior wouldn't have been able to affect him, but he could not afford this sort of delay now, because Dian Mangban could already see that several more people had appeared. Batian, hurry and go. Leave this man to us. 4 symbols Yin-Yang Soul Trap. An elder of 50-some years and a woman of 40-some years had suddenly appeared. The middle-aged woman threw out several large rocks, each about the size of a millstone, that crashed down around Dian Mangban. Boom! 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 The heavens and earth shook, and before Dian Mangban could react, those rocks had landed in some sort of formation. Not good! Dian Mangban suspiciously scanned his surroundings and realized that someone had already planted several similar rocks around him. He paled as a deep unease began to seethe in his heart. There was no time to think. Dian Mangban's blurred as he shot like a bolt of lightning to escape this region. But he was far too late. Huang Batian, Elder Du, and Elder Fong had been waiting in hiding for this very moment. Even Wang Chong's escape route and his intentional opening of the Steel Fortress's rear gate had been part of the plan. It was absolutely impossible for Dian Mangban to escape at this moment. Buzz! There was a flash of light, and the scenery around Dian Mangban changed. After walking just a few steps, Dian Mangban realized that there was nothing but chaos before his eyes, and the steel fortress was nowhere to be seen. It was like he had entered a completely different space. Even someone as formidable as Dian Mangban, a conqueror of countless cities, a man of talent and daring, was shocked and enraged by this sight. "Open up!" Dian Mangban bellowed as he charged forward, his body exploding with stellar energy. When a brigadier general unleashed all their stellar energy, they produced a truly frightening power. Vast waves of energy transformed into massive tides that swept in every direction. Even metal would be pulverized in the face of this sort of attack, much less earth or rock. Yet this explosion of stellar energy, the strongest attack Dian Mangban could muster, caused not a single stir in his surroundings. All this stellar energy vanished like a mud doll in the ocean, leaving nothing behind. Not only that, as Dian Mangban charged forward, he encountered no obstruction, and no matter how far he went, all he could see was gray. It was impossible to tell up from down, east from west. An ancient formation. Dian Mangban felt his heart chill. When he was at the Great Snow Mountain Holy Temple, he had heard that the Great Tang had a few secretive legacies, like befuddling formations and illusion formations. With a few tree branches or rocks, one could obscure an opponent's senses and make them see illusions. But this was just a little trick, and someone with the sharp gaze and firm resolve of a brigadier general or great general was not easily confused by external factors, so illusion formations were useless against them. When Dian Mangban had heard of this, he had laughed. But the scenario before him was clearly of a completely different nature. Once caught, Dian Mangban was unable to sense anything going on outside, could not reach the boundary, and could not shatter the formation. This was no longer some traditional smokescreen or illusory formation. Dian Mangban had been under the impression that only those formidable and legendary illusory formations of the Central Plains that had long ago been lost could have accomplished such a feat. Dian Mangban had never predicted that he would encounter one in this fortress built on the triangular gap. Breaking this ancient formation wasn't impossible, but it would take a great deal of time, and for him, time was fast running out. Dian Mangban's heart might as well have been a block of ice. Dian! When Dusong Mangpoj saw that man and woman appear and Dian Mangban disappear, he paled and his body chilled. Buzz! Dusong Mangpoj immediately turned and began to charge in Dian Mangban's direction. But he had barely made it a few steps when a massive wave of energy like 1,000 swords slashed toward him. "You still have the mind to think about saving him? None of you will be escaping today." A voice so cold that it made his head go numb came from behind him, so close that it felt like it had been whispered into his ear. Dusong Mangpoj trembled, and it felt like a basin of icy water had been poured over his head. He was so cold that even his breathing seemed on the verge of stopping. The black-robed elder. The image of that grim and absurdly powerful black-robed elder emerged in Dusong Mangpoj's mind. If he had known that this fortress contained such a terrifying existence, he would have fled with his army without even trying to attack the fortress. "Dian, it's not that I don't want to help you, but I'm going to find it hard to keep just myself alive. This is all I can do for you." With a burst of stellar energy, Dusong Mangpoj dodged the demonic Emperor Old Man's second attack and charged forward. At the same time, his right hand reached for his scimitar and immediately threw it toward the area Dian Mangban had vanished with all the strength he could muster. The air shrieked as if it was about to tear apart. The scimitar transformed into a comet, wrapped in a destructive energy. Such was the power of an imperial great general that this strike from Dusong Mangpoj would be enough to shatter a mountain. Even if this attack could not save Dian Mangban, it could at least shake the formation, creating a crack that Dian Mangban could use to escape. Bang! But the scimitar only managed to make it a few zhong before a thin silhouette caught up to it. A massive energy instantly sent the scimitar flying away. Dusong Mangpoj's heart sank. He had clearly seen that his scimitar had been knocked away by a simple wooden hairpin. The Wuxiang village chief had finally struck. "Dian, you'll have to protect yourself. I've done all that I could." A hint of struggle appeared in Dusong Mangpoj's eyes as he shot past the 4 symbols Yin Yang soul trap and fled into the distance. At his level of strength, He would only need to stop for a moment to save Dian Mangban with one mighty blow. But Dusong Mangpoj did not even dare to think about this idea. A second's delay meant that the two monstrous figures behind him wouldn't just kill Dian Mangban, but him as well. When picking between two evils, one had to pick the lesser. The choice was obvious. Buzz. As Dusong Mangpoj took flight, leaping onto the wall, within the four symbols Yin Yang Soul Trap, Dian Mangban was welcoming his most important guest. Buzz. There was a flash of light followed by crisp and relaxed footsteps. Several figures had appeared in the four symbols Yin Yang Soul Trap. Dian Mangban, we meet again. Wang Chong faintly smiled, his clothes lightly swaying as he walked into Dian Mangban's field of vision. It's you. Dian Mangban's pupils constricted as he gazed at that familiar figure, as if he had been poked by a needle. He had never imagined that the fleeing Wang Chong would appear here. Dian Mangban's shock quickly turned into a sneer. A good show. I really didn't think that you would dare to appear before me. As Dian Mangban spoke, his eyes seethed with killing intent. Haha. I appeared here so that I could send you off. Wang Chong faintly smiled and immediately attacked. At the same time, Dian Mangban's body exploded with energy as he lunged toward Wang Chong. Great Snow Mountain Devil Dragon Art. Vast Heaven Earth Art. Great Yin Yang Art. Several explosions rang out within the four symbols Yin Yang Soul Trap, more dazzling than the sun, and fierce winds swept through the space created by the formation. A few moments later, there was a scream, and then silence. Buzz. After around 5 minutes, there was a flash of light as Wang Chong, wearing the karmic battle armor, strode out of the four symbols Yin Yang Soul Trap. His eyes were sharp and profound, his entire person bursting with energy. More importantly, a pure and vigorous energy was rising from his body. It seemed like Wang Chong had become a new person. The aura of the Saint Martial Realm no longer conferred to him by the karmic battle armor. This energy was all his own, naturally arising from within. The Saint Martial Realm. I finally succeeded. Wang Chong's eyes flashed with an intimidating elegance, his very being inspiring respect and fear. This was not an intentional action, but a natural aura that one exuded once one reached a certain level of cultivation. The combination of the vast Heaven-Earth art and the great Yin-Yang art had finally managed to deal Dian Mangban a heavy wound. Wang Chong had then absorbed the energy of this legendary Tibetan brigadier general, the Azura war god, the future king of generals. Upon absorbing the Saint Martial energy, he had finally broken through that threshold and reached the initial tier of the Saint Martial realm. Although he was still far from the peak of the Saint Martial realm, this was still a difference as vast as the gap between heaven and earth to Wang Chong. As long as he could rest firmly on this level, he could relearn many of the supreme techniques from his last life, and utilize many of the skills that had been locked away. He was finally released. His fighting power had not simply been given a boost, but had been multiplied. Most importantly, he had finally stepped on the path to becoming the war saint once more. Starting from now, he wouldn't need very long to reach the cultivation level of his last life. Congratulations to user for completing the threat to Qixi. You have been rewarded with 400 points of destiny energy. Warning: the history of the world has changed. With the death of renowned General Dian Mangban, the course of the plateau has been changed. These changes have worldwide ramifications and have produced many indeterminate variables, with the changes still being calculated. Since user was responsible for these changes, user is rewarded 2,000 points of destiny energy. At this moment, the Stone of Destiny spoke, and upon hearing this voice, Wang Chong couldn't help but slightly pause and let out a gasp. Strange. Wang Chong's eyebrows slightly rose, belying his massive shock. There was an extra 2,000 points of destiny energy. Wang Chong was unsurprised by the reward of 400 points of destiny energy for killing Dian Mangban, because that was exactly what the Stone of Destiny had promised him. But the 2,000 points of destiny energy that came afterward were truly a big surprise. The Stone of Destiny had not even mentioned such a thing when giving the mission. The Stone of Destiny said that changing the history of the plateau has worldwide ramifications. It turns out that changing the fate of other countries can also result in generous rewards. This is quite the method for rewarding extra points of destiny energy. In addition, the penalty for failure in the threat to Qixi was 2000 destiny energy, and the reward now is also 2000 destiny energy. Are these related? If they are, then I guess there's another special way to obtain destiny energy from the missions given by the Stone of Destiny. Wang Chong looked up at the sky, his mind in deep thought. However, a moment later, Wang Chong took in a deep breath and returned to his senses. He could research the Stone of Destiny later. The urgent task at hand was dealing with this battle. Kyle! Shouts could be heard as Wang Chong opened his eyes. In front of him, the Tibetans within the steel fortress were crumbling, their morale shattered by Dusong Mangpo's flight. It was said that the morale of the entire army was tied to the commander-in-chief. So when Dusong Mangpo fled, his tens of thousands of cavalry had suffered a massive blow, a destructive blow. An imperial great general represented the highest echelon of power in the world, and in the minds of the Tibetan warriors, such an existence would never flee from battle. But when Dusong Mangpo fled from the combined assaults of the demonic Emperor Old Man and the Wuxiang village chief, this deep-rooted conviction was completely overturned. The collapse of the Tibetan army was total and spontaneous, turning from a full-throated assault into a panicked retreat in the blink of an eye. The unique terrain of the triangular gap also showed its might at this time. When Wang Chong was dealing with Dian Mangban in the Four Symbols Inyang Soul Trap, all the Wuxiang cavalry had finished forming up, Li Sai leading them in chasing down the fleeing Tibetans. Although they did not have Wang Chong's powerful war halos, the Tibetans and their powerful white braves likewise lacked the boost from Dian Mangban. Without the Great Bond Formation or Dian Mangban's war halo, the white braves were like dragons without a leader. Given that they also had to contend with the flight of tens of thousands of their fellow Tibetans, they had lost much of their fighting power. Interesting. Wang Chong's eyes flashed as he considered the situation, his lips curling into a smile. Bree! The white-hoofed shadow let out a long cry, kicking up dust as it galloped up to Wang Chong. Mounting it, Wang Chong quickly charged out of the fortress. As he left the fortress, the smiling Wang Chong quickly unleashed his war halos. Boom! 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 With a metal clattering, halo after halo emerged from his body, shrouding the white-hoofed shadow and then spreading over the fortress and his army. Boom! Earth-shaking cheers rose from outside the fortress. Lord Marquis! Lord Marquis has come. Lord Marquis was just dealing with Dian Mangban a while ago. With Lord Marquis here, it means that Dian Mangban is dead. Charge. Now is the time to counterattack. Don't let them escape. The cheers of the army shook the earth. Although none of them could see Wang Chong, they could sense the powerful energy of the halos. The three halos of Dusk Stallion, the bane of the battlefield, the bane of generals, all the halos layered together, strengthening allies and weakening foes. One could easily imagine the state of the Tibetans. Screams and panicked shouts filled the air, and even from a distance, Wang Chong could sense the terror and dread. Wang Chong knew that he had truly won this battle. Hiya! Wang Chong rode past the gate, past the steel walls outside the fortress. As he looked around, he could see that the northern region of the plateau was in chaos. The several thousand Wuxiang cavalry divided into many small arrow formations and chasing down the fleeing Tibetans. The Tibetans were in complete disarray, none of them daring to stop or resist, all of them panicked and only caring about escape. At this moment, even the clan experts in the city had joined in the pursuit. Corpses of Tibetan cavalry were strewn across the earth, and even the massive black banner with the white eagle, Dusong Mangpo symbol, had been cut down, its remnants drifting in the wind. Clang! As he was looking around, a metal clattering came from beneath him. The milky white bane of the battlefield halo suddenly began to brighten, the halo rapidly expanding before sweeping over the battlefield like a wave. Congratulations to user! The bane of the battlefield halo has reached the 4th level. That familiar voice rang out in his mind. At first dazed, Wang Chong quickly broke into a smile. The bane of the battlefield that had been dormant for so long had finally broken into the next level. A truly pleasant surprise. After all, The conditions for leveling up the bane of the battlefield only grew harsher as the levels increased. Hiya! These thoughts on his mind, Wang Chong urged his horse into a charge. In the distance, he could see two figures, one black and one white, rapidly making their way toward him. Master! Village chief! Wang Chong shouted, his eyebrows raised, his face full of joy as he went up to welcome them. The greatest contributors to this battle were the demonic Emperor Old Man and the Wuxiang village chief. If he had wanted to defeat Dusong Mangpoj without them, then he would have truly had quite the headache. At a place not far from the last of the steel walls, Wang Chong dismounted and met up with the two elders. Master Village Chief, how is it? Did you manage to catch Dusong Mangpoj? No. This young junior truly has some abilities. Old Fong and I chased him down, but he managed to use the strength of his tens of thousands of soldiers to stop us and escape without a trace. The demonic Emperor Old Man lightly said, speaking of the matter like it was just a trifling affair. Dusong Mangpoj was a famous Yusang Imperial Great General, known throughout the world as the Eagle of the Plateau, and one of the few peak Saint martial experts of the world. However, in the mouth of the demonic Emperor Old Man, he was just a young junior. But Wang Chong found nothing inappropriate about this form of address. Although Dusong Mangpoj was at the peak of the Saint martial realm, he was much younger than Wang Chong's master, and he had also not spent as much time at the peak of the Saint martial realm, so there was nothing excessive about calling him a young junior. Moreover, the demonic Emperor Old Man had once been the supreme master of the evil path in the Central Plains, with countless experts dying at his hand. He had killed so many Saint martial masters that almost all the sect masters of the world paled at the mention of his name. There were very few people in the world who could sit on his level. Even in that apocalyptic era, when Wang Chong became the Grand Marshal of the world and the most powerful war saint in the history of the Central Plains, he still regarded the name of the demonic Emperor Old Man as an existence hanging high above him like the noon sun. If not even the Wang Chong of that time had the right, Dusong Mangpoj certainly had no reason to be brash. I also only found out today that he was an Imperial Great General of Yusang. If I knew that he would lead soldiers to invade the Great Tang, I would have never let him go, the white-haired Wuxiang village chief sighed. Wang Chong's eyebrows rose, and he finally could not hold back his question. Village chief, what's the story behind all this? At the rear gate of the fortress, he had already noticed something strange. For an Yusang great general to recognize the Wuxiang village chief was simply beyond belief. The Wuxiang village chief hid nothing and told Wang Chong the story. So when Dusong Mangpoj was fleeing, he accidentally ended up in Wuxiang village, and then for the sake of Huang Batian village chief let him go? Wang Chong asked, his brow creased. It is exactly as you say. The Wuxiang village chief sighed and nodded, and Wang Chong felt like there was nothing more he could say as he looked at the ashamed and remorseful expression on the old man's face. Huang Batian was Wuxiang village's outermost protector, but he was also a martial maniac. Anyone who could defeat him would win his good favor, and he would regard them as his brother and comrade. Wang Chong had known about this for some time, and he also knew that he had released a person who had intruded into Wuxiang village. But Wang Chong could have never imagined that this person would be Dusong Mangpoj. Destiny seems to preordain everything. I managed with great difficulty to entrap Dusong Mangpoj and expose his identity, but I didn't think that it would be Huang Batian that would allow him to escape. Wang Chong could only bitterly smile. Huang Boshan's love for martial arts was a part of his nature and could not be changed. There was nothing that could be done about Dusong Mangpoj exploiting this point. Village chief, there's no need to worry. Dusong Mangpoj should have received a big shock this time, and in this triangular gap, he lost many soldiers and a brigadier general in Dian Mangban. It will be some time until he dares to come back. Wang Chong comforted. You're right on that point. The demonic Emperor Old Man suddenly butted in, a proud expression on his face. Although we allowed him to escape, Old Fong and I managed to heavily wound him. He'll need at least half a year to recover. Wang Chong was pleasantly surprised to hear this. As he had been in the Four Symbols Inyang Soul Trap dealing with Dian Mangban, he had no idea what was going on in the outside world. Wang Chong had not expected that someone of Dusong Mangpo's strength would have been severely wounded by his master and the Wuxiang village chief. This meant that his operation had turned out even better than predicted. Wonderful! This means that Dusong Mangpo will find it very difficult to appear in the northern region of the plateau for a very long time, much less threaten Qixi. Wang Chong had an excited expression. Oh, master! When Dusong Mangpo used his secret technique to borrow the strength of his army, how did you manage to break it? In the War of the Southwest, Wang Chong had seen Huashu Huizong use a secret art of the Great Snow Mountain Holy Temple to transform into a giant golden Buddha that had been able to block the strength of his father's mighty miracle god with a single palm. The scene had left a very deep impression on him. As an Yusang great general, Dusong Mangpo most certainly had a similar technique. That was no big deal. Such secret arts are very simple. He could only use the strength of the people near him. The closer they are, the more strength he can borrow, and vice versa. To break it, one only needs to kill all the people nearby. The demonic emperor old man lightly said. Brother Zhang is correct. This sort of secret technique truly isn't much to worry about. The Wuxiang village chief agreed. The sight of his two elders appearing like they had performed some trifling errand left Wang Chong momentarily speechless. If the martial arts of the Great Snow Mountain Holy Temple were so easy to break, then the Great Snow Mountain would have never become the sacred land of Yusang, and Yusang would have never become such a serious problem. And Dusong Mangpo had thousands of people at his side. Not only were these people providing energy to Dusong Mangpo, but they were also being boosted by Dusong Mangpo's strength. Killing all of them was easier said than done. But in the mouths of these two elders, it was as simple as eating or drinking. Rumble. As they were talking, a massive cloud of dust stirred in the distance, and a thunderous sound alarmed all three. Wang Chong turned his head and saw that hundreds upon thousands of cavalry were charging out of the northwest. These seem to be Great Tang cavalry? The Wuxiang village chief said as he narrowed his eyes. He didn't have too great an understanding of the Great Tang army, but he could at least distinguish the troops of his side from the enemy. It's the Qixi Protectorate Army, Wang Chong slowly said, his heart sinking. The army charging over was that hitherto spectating Qixi Protectorate Army and Fuming Lingcha. They've come to take the credit for this battle. Dian Mangban was dead, Dusong Mangpo was heavily injured, and the entire Tibetan army was scattered. Fuming Lingcha and his Qixi Protectorate Army had not engaged early or even late in the battle, but only showed up when everything was settled and the harvest was being reaped. Their aim was as plain as day. What? The demonic emperor old man twisted his head and looked toward the approaching cavalry. The Qixi Protectorate Army was traveling at maximum speed, Fuming Lingcha's halo bolstering them so that they could move as fast as lightning. In the blink of an eye, the Qixi Protectorate Army charged into the Tibetan army like a meteor shower. Nay, it was complete chaos, and in a few moments, countless Tibetan cavalry were knocked down and trampled to death. With no formation or organization, with no Dian Mangban or Dusong Mangpo, the Tibetan army was a panicked and fleeing mob. Anyone could have cut them down, and Fuming Lingcha himself was leading his soldiers. Rumble. The earth trembled as an explosion came from the densest concentration of soldiers. Screams filled the air and blazing light soared into the sky. Hundreds of Tibetan cavalry were tossed into the air by a vast sea of energy. In a single strike, a large area of the battlefield was cleared. In the center of that area, Wang Chong could clearly see an extremely imposing figure, the large saber in his hand giving off a tyrannical aura that seemed ready to cleave open the heavens. Meanwhile, the blazing aura around him was dreadful to behold and immediately let one know that this was an extremely dangerous man. On this battlefield, he was the undisputed king, a powerful hegemon. All soldiers, whether white brave or Wuxiang cavalry, were insignificant ants before him. Fuming Lingcha. Wang Chong needed only a glance to tell who he was. Their first meeting outside the City of Steel had left an indelible memory in his mind. This Qixi Protector General was first like a cowering turtle, and then a murderer borrowing someone else's knife to kill. He had planned to use Dusong Mangpo and the Tibetans to deal with Wang Chong, But upon seeing that the situation wasn't right and that Dusong Mangpoj had lost, he had marched in his army to take the credit for himself. Wang Chong didn't have a proper military post, and the 5,000 Wuxian cavalry were not proper Tang cavalry. This meant that Wang Chong could really do nothing if Fuming Lingcha wanted to take credit for this battle. Wang Chong could even predict Fuming Lingcha's next few steps. He was probably going to quickly submit a report to the imperial court claiming that this battle was all his doing. After all, no other faction except Wang Chong's and Fuming Lingcha's had been observing this battle, making it difficult to determine the truth. If the imperial court really did investigate, Fuming Lingcha could show the evidence that he really had participated in this battle, and Wang Chong wouldn't be able to refute it. Bastard! The most passive in times of battle and the most proactive when stealing credit. And you would even use enemies to deal with people on your own side. Do you really think that because I'm younger and have less status than you, I can't do anything? Wang Chong could not suppress the fiery light of anger in his eyes. Master Village Chief, I'm going to go and meet him. Wang Chong suddenly mounted his horse and galloped toward Fuming Lingcha's direction. Let's also go and take a look. Behind him, the elders glanced at each other and followed. In the distance, the Wuxian cavalry and Qixi Protectorate army had already met, the soldiers in a stalemate. When Wang Chong arrived, all the soldiers retreated to the sides. Even the soldiers of the Qixi Protectorate army subconsciously lowered their heads and yielded the path to Wang Chong. As their eyes flitted past Wang Chong, none of them could hide their shame. The Qixi Protectorate army had acted very improperly in the battle. Even though they were supposed to defend Qixi, they had not carried out their duty. When they should have attacked, they hadn't, and when the battle was over, they had swooped in to take the credit. This was not how a true soldier should have acted. Now that the actual person had appeared, they naturally felt ashamed. The moment Wang Chong appeared, time seemed to stop, everything going still. All eyes focused on Wang Chong, and even that divine and despotic figure in the center suddenly stopped, one hand gripping his saber, his eyes shining with bright light as he stood unmoving. That severe and tyrannical gaze coldly and emotionlessly stared at Wang Chong. Wang Chong, you have done well in assisting the Qixi Protectorate army in attacking Yusang. I will definitely report your achievements to the imperial court. Fuming Lingcha got ahead of Wang Chong, immediately speaking in a bold and righteous tone. If someone had arrived at this moment, this attitude would have convinced them that it was Fuming Lingcha and his Qixi army that had fought a fierce battle with the Tibetans, not Wang Chong and the Wuxian cavalry. For Lord Protector General's enormous achievements, Wang Chong might send Milord a gift as well. A few days ago, Wang Chong was gifted a divine turtle from the western regions. Wang Chong will gift it to Milord. Wang Chong looked down from the white-hoofed shadow, his eyes full of derision. Impudent! Wang Chong's words immediately triggered a storm of rebuke. Turtles could stretch out and retract into their shells, and Wang Chong was clearly accusing Fuming Lingcha and the Qixi Protectorate army of acting like a turtle, only reaching out of their shells when the danger had passed. Fuming Lingcha said nothing, but his eyes were spitting flame. Wang Chong was of far lower status, and for him to so coldly ridicule him like this was impudent to the extreme. Wang Chong! Fuming Lingcha's expression chilled, but just as he began to speak, his eyes suddenly flitted past Wang Chong and onto the two figures walking up from behind him. His pupils constricted as if he had been poked, and all his anger dissipated, replaced by an indescribable sense of danger that started at his feet and spread to his entire body. Fuming Lingcha's entire body went tight, and he felt like there was a knife at his back. It's them. Fuming Lingcha immediately recognized this pair. When Dusong Mangpoj entered the steel fortress, Fuming Lingcha had sensed the sudden emergence of two powerful and terrifying auras. Even from such a long distance, he had been able to tell how dangerous and frightening they were. It was precisely because he had sensed them that Fuming Lingcha realized that the situation had changed and immediately ordered his Qixi Protectorate army to enter the battle. I didn't think that this brat would have such formidable figures at his side. Just how many more secrets does he have? A deep apprehension appeared in Fuming Lingcha's eyes as those two figures ambled over. Humph! There's always a higher mountain, Wang Chong inwardly sneered. This fellow Fuming Lingcha sees a gap and tries to stick in a needle. He only knows how to bully the weak. It seems like there are times where I have to show off a little power. His perceptive gaze had instantly noticed the changes in Fuming Lingcha's complexion. It had truly been the wise course of action to invite his master and the Wuxiang village chief for this operation, as it now seemed like Fuming Lingcha was finally acting a bit more cautious. Wang Chong, what is the meaning of this? Do you really think that you can act impudently in front of me after inviting a few formidable individuals over? Let me tell you, in Qixi, only Fuming Lingcha's words matter. Wang Chong, do you dare rebel in front of me? Fuming Lingcha icily said. 20 years ago, if a puny foreigner dared to speak like this in front of me, I would have killed them with a single blow of my saber. The demonic emperor old man's icy voice came from behind Wang Chong. His gaze was filled with contempt, his manner threatening. Even when facing a great general like Fuming Lingcha, he made no effort to hide his power. The demonic emperor old man was a supreme figure of the martial arts world, who had stirred countless storms of blood and killed countless supreme experts. Many people trembled in fear at the slightest mention of his name. A saint martial realm Fuming Lingcha was nothing in his eyes. Impudent! Fuming Lingcha was fuming, and even at his most patient, he would have never accepted such words. Disciple! Do you need me to kill him? Just nod and marshal Uncle Fong and I will go and kill him right now. That Dusong Mangpoj was able to run rather fast and we weren't able to kill him. But this foreigner is nothing at all. I can kill him with a snap of my fingers. The demonic emperor old man spoke, his eyes as sharp as swords as they settled on Fuming Lingcha's neck, his killing intent exposed for everyone to see. In his eyes, Fuming Lingcha was not some imperial great general who could awe the world, not the mighty Qixi protector general, but a chicken or duck. Next to him, the Wuxiang village chief didn't nod, but he didn't shake his head either. He had seen the efforts Wang Chong had made to deal with Yusang, and he had also seen that while Fuming Lingcha and the Qixi Protectorate army had not appeared when they were needed, they did appear after the battle to take the credit. It was truly too shameless. Bastard! I can't believe my ears. Fuming Lingcha's face was red and his body was trembling. For the mighty Qixi Protector General, an imperial great general, to be so publicly humiliated in front of his soldiers was a blatant disregard for his status. Fuming Lingcha's eyes were awash with killing intent, and his fingers instantly began to tighten their grip on his saber. But then a gaze even colder than Fuming Lingcha's locked onto him, and he instantly suppressed his anger in fear. Fuming Lingcha had fought against Dusong Mangpoj more than once, and he knew that their strengths were on a similar level. If even Dusong Mangpoj had to flee this pair like he had encountered some vile god, then Fuming Lingcha was well aware that he was no match for them. Wang Chong, are you planning to attack me? Fuming Lingcha pushed down his anger and looked up at the mounted Wang Chong. Haha, Lord Protector General. Where did this idea come from? This was just a joke. If Lord Protector General wishes to take credit for this matter, I have nothing to say. But there is one word of advice that I have for Lord Protector General. Some things are too hot to handle. Lord Protector General should think carefully before grabbing them. With these words, Wang Chong turned his horse around, riding back to the distant steel fortress. Master, let's go. After exchanging a few words with Fuming Lingcha, the party quickly left. It's still not time to move against him. Wang Chong told himself that he still has his status as Qixi Protector General, after all. However, I really have to think of a way to get him away from Qixi. The battle was quickly brought to an end, with the Tibetans utterly crushed. All of them had fled like ants in every direction, presenting somewhat of a challenge for the pursuers. Wang Chong didn't have many soldiers in the first place, and further scattering them would be extremely dangerous if another army appeared. Pass on my order. All soldiers retreat. Cease the pursuit. Wang Chong quickly gave the order, and the Wuxiang cavalry quickly gathered together. But the Qixi Protectorate army remained mobilized. Lord Marquis, this is absurd. The people of the Qixi Protectorate have no shame. We fought with our lives on the line, and they just sat back and took the credit for free. That's right. The Qixi Protectorate Army's camps were just nearby, and yet they refused to come out. Just this alone is enough for Lord Marquis to rebuke them. It's too excessive. Are they treating us like we don't exist? Behind the steel walls, the soldiers had gathered together and were currently aiming angry looks at the distant Qixi Protectorate army. The Qixi Protectorate soldiers had acted like they didn't exist, boldly and confidently snatching the credit for themselves. Some of the Qixi soldiers had even run their horses in front to block their path, even going so far as to intentionally ram the horses into each other. Their methods were truly lowly and despicable. Dogs could bite humans, but humans couldn't bite dogs. The several thousand Wuxiang cavalry could hack away as they pleased at the Tibetans without blinking an eye, but they could do nothing against other great Tang soldiers. Haha, it's just a minor itch. Don't worry about it. Let them take it. Fuming Lingcha might treat this as some incredible feat, but for us, this is only a minor accomplishment made to set the foundation. In comparison to our feats in the future, this battle isn't even worth mentioning. Wang Chong waved his hand unconcernedly. Besides, it's not as easy as Fuming Lingcha thinks to steal credit. Reporting. Lord Marquis, the soldiers of the Qixi Protectorate Army are pushing their way into the fortress. A scout suddenly rode in, leaving a trail of dust behind him as he rushed to the gathered officers. Buzz. These words instantly grabbed everyone's attention. Lord Marquis, the fortress only has craftsmen and no Tibetans. What are they up to? These bastards, are they after our steel fortress? We built it and they steal it? That's simply too shameless. They would dare. Chang Sanyuan, Su Shixian, Su Kai, and the other officers looked to Wang Chong. With the Tibetans retreating, the fortress on the triangular gap now had incredible strategic significance. Given Fuming Lingcha's conduct, if one allowed him to take an inch by allowing him to rush in at the end of the battle to claim the credit for himself, then he would take a foot and snatch that steel fortress that they had paid such an enormous price to build. Lord Marquis, would they really do this? Su Kai worriedly asked Wang Chong. Certainly not. Wang Chong was rather calm, immediately casting aside the worries of his officers. Fuming Lingcha definitely thought about taking this fortress. After all, this fort could be a base for the Qixi Protectorate Army and make their operations much easier. However, the most he would ever do is think about it. He would never actually realize his thoughts. A mighty great general could never be so senile. Ah! The officers glanced at each other, stunned by this judgment. Haha, as of now, only we can build these steel fortresses, with the city in Wuxiang being the greatest proof. These modular cities have our distinctive brand, and Fuming Lingcha would never be such a fool that he would try and take them. Even if he had a mind to, not a single one of the many ministers in the court would believe that Fuming Lingcha and his Qixi Protectorate Army had constructed this fortress. Wang Chong smiled as he looked at the confused expressions on the faces of his subordinates. Moreover, the fortress was damaged after the battle. Without our help, Fuming Lingcha would never be able to repair it. In addition, only we understand how to operate the many mechanisms of the fortress and understand what sort of maintenance needs to be done. Fuming Lingcha is a smart man. Even if he wants to snatch it from us, it wouldn't be now. By sending people into the fortress right now, Fuming Lingcha probably has other plans. Speak. What's going on? These last words were aimed at the scout who had given the report. The scout didn't dare to be slow, quickly explaining the situation. It turned out that when Wang Chong was gathering the army, around 20 people from the Qixi Protectorate Army had snuck their way. The movements of these people were rather strange. They did nothing except look around as if searching for something. The strangest thing of all was that these weren't ordinary scouts. Although they had removed their emblematic armor, experienced scouts could tell at a glance that these were army officers. Very well, you're dismissed. As for the Qixi Protectorate Army officers in the fortress, Chang Sanyuan, bring some soldiers with you and drive them out. Although I'm not a person who would quibble over every small thing, the Qixi Protectorate Army is acting far too arrogantly here, Wang Chong said. Yes, Lord Marquis. Chang Sanyuan quickly gathered 40-some Wuxiang cavalry and went to carry out the order. The teamwork of the Wuxiang and the power of their formations meant that if these Qixi soldiers still refused to leave, they would only be looking for trouble. There was a trotting of hooves and a whispered voice at Wang Chong's ear. Lord Marquis, Fuming Lingcha's people couldn't be looking for Dian Mangban's corpse? Could they? Li Sai, riding his Fergana steed, stood like a guardian god at Wang Chong's side. As he watched Chang Sanyuan's group leave, a hint of doubt flashed in his eyes. Wang Chong didn't turn his head, only giving a subtle nod, his expression turning serious. Fuming Lingcha probably didn't know at the start, but he should have captured a few Tibetans by now and realized what happened to Dian Mangban. On the battlefield, there are far too many eyes and mouths. When I was dealing with Dian Mangban, probably no small number of Tibetans who had charged witnessed him being captured by Elder Fong and Elder Du. There's nothing that can be done about that. But as long as Fuming Lingcha can't get his hands on Dian Mangban's corpse, he'll find it very difficult to snatch the credit for this hard-fought battle from Lord Marquis. Li Sai whispered as he trotted his horse another few steps forward. Ha! This is why I was never afraid that Fuming Lingcha would take the credit for these deeds. There are some things that you can't take credit for just because you want to. Dian Mangban arose from the Great Snow Mountain Holy Temple, was a Tibetan brigadier general, the Azura war god of Yusang, and he had quite the accomplished record in the western regions. As long as we have Dian Mangban's body, Fuming Lingcha will find it very difficult to claim the credit for this battle. Wang Chong broke into a grin. It wasn't that he was an incredibly tolerant and open-minded person that could allow Fuming Lingcha to take any credit he pleased, but that Fuming Lingcha had never been able to take the credit away in the first place. Dian Mangban was one of the commanders of the Tibetan side of this battle. Presumably, when Fuming Lingcha saw Wang Chong come out empty-handed, he thought that Dian Mangban had escaped. After all, if a brigadier general put all their mind into escaping, their chances were rather high. However, Wang Chong had stepped onto the plateau already ready to deal with Dian Mangban. So how could he have allowed him to escape? Let's go. If all goes as expected, Fuming Lingcha should be paying us a visit very soon. Wang Chong gave the order, and shortly afterward, all the Wuxian cavalry entered the fortress. Not long after Wang Chong entered, the Tensum Chishi officers who had infiltrated the fortress were driven out. What are you doing? We're from the Chishi Protectorate Army. Do you really think this is your territory? You dare touch us? This is rebellion. Arrogant. Release me. All the people from the Chishi Protectorate Army had their arms tied around their backs and were being pushed out of the city. Although they were being forced to walk forward, they continued to curse, their words growing more and more profane. We're still at war with Yusang. Tell them that if they don't just shut their mouths, we'll handle them like they were deserters. As a Marquis of the Imperial Court, it shouldn't be a problem for me to deal with a few deserters for Protector General Fuming Lingcha. Wang Chong indifferently said as he looked down from the wall at the expelled Chishi officers. This message was quickly passed on, and those officers immediately fell quiet, their entire bodies trembling and their lips tightly pursed in fear. Lord Marquis, Fuming Lingcha is coming over, Chang Sanyuan warned. A burst of wind blew over the walls as Wang Chong turned to look. In the distance, a stalwart man wielding a large saber more than 7 feet long was riding a mighty steed toward the steel fortress. His appearance like a god descended to the mortal realm. Humph! Have the gate closed. Wang Chong waved his right hand and coldly laughed. Yes, Lord Marquis. A messenger went to pass on the order, and quickly, gears began to grind as the 2 large gates of the miniature city of steel on the triangular gap slowly closed. With a massive boom, Fuming Lingcha was shut out from the fortress. His eyes widening, he brought his horse to a stop. This bastard! Fuming Lingcha immediately noticed Wang Chong on the wall, and anger began to pool in the depths of his eyes. My lord, this brat is challenging us, a deputy said indignantly. All of Chishi was under the beck and call of the Chishi Protectorate headquarters, and as Chishi Protector General, Fuming Lingcha was the undisputed commander of the region. For Wang Chong to close the gate in front of him was an absolute affront to his dignity. He's getting more and more impetuous. My lord, we have to give him a lesson, or else his arrogance will reach the heavens. Before the deputy could say any more, Fuming Lingcha extended a right hand to stop him. Speak no further. I understand how to proceed. Fuming Lingcha stared at Wang Chong, his eyes shifting and mercurial. Meanwhile, on the wall, Wang Chong showed no signs of backing down. I'll let you enjoy this for now, but you'll fall into my hands eventually. Fuming Lingcha gave Wang Chong a profound glance. But in the end, the thought of those two supreme experts backing Wang Chong gave him pause. Let's go. Fuming Lingcha quickly turned his horse around and left, and with his departure, the entirety of the Qixi Protectorate army charged off. Night descended, and with all three factions withdrawing, this battle on the steppe finally concluded. But even though the battle was over, its effects were just beginning to spread. Dian Mangban and Dusong Mangpoj had not been ordinary experts. Both of them were extremely influential figures in the western regions, each with their own impressive reputation. The fact that an army of tens of thousands of Tibetan cavalry led by Dusong Mangpoj and Dian Mangban had actually been defeated at the Triangular Gap, had almost been wiped out, was enough to make the entire western regions quake. The deaths of the 5,000 White Braves had the largest effect. In the past, the White Braves had wreaked havoc in every direction, destroying many cities and small kingdoms. They were devilish existences that made many of these city-states tremble in fear. But these powerful White Braves had died together with the ordinary Tibetan cavalry at the Triangular Gap. There was no news more shocking than this to these small kingdoms. Indeed, it was like heavenly music to their ears. How could this be? We've all seen the power of the White Braves. How could they be completely wiped out? In the northwest corner of the Yusang Empire, south of the Tsong Mountains, the border closest to the Anxi Protectorate, this matter was an unprecedented shock to the kingdoms of Greater and Lesser Balor. Quickly investigate. I must know who exterminated the White Braves. These people are the saviors of our Lesser Balor. No matter what, I must thank them. In the royal hall of Lesser Balor, the red-bearded king of Lesser Balor had been holding a feast when he heard the news. He was so excited that he dropped his gilded wine cup of colored glass onto the floor, where it shattered into pieces. But in its neighbor of Greater Balor, this news elicited the exact opposite reaction. Impossible! No one can exterminate the White Braves. We all know how powerful they are. They couldn't possibly be defeated, much less wiped out. This must be fake news meant to harm our Greater Balor. Pass down my decree. Anyone who dares to discuss such gossip is to be executed. The king of Greater Balor had an ashen expression. His thunderous bellows echoed throughout the kingdom. And in the other kingdoms of the western regions, further Beilu, Kokand, Kanjut, Kongju, Dayuan I, and others, this news also sent massive shocks running through them. In the western regions, there were two massive forces. One was the Western Turkic Khaganate, and the other was Yusang. For a very long time, the Western Turkic Khaganate had been flourishing, exerting a powerful influence on the kingdoms of the western regions. This was not the case for the Yusang Empire, but even if it did not have a long history of dominance over the western regions, its influence was still only second to the Turks. At times, even the brave horsemen of the Western Turkic Khaganate would retreat when running into the cavalry of the Yusang Empire, regarding them with extreme vigilance. Now that this sort of battle had taken place on the plateau, involving two imperial great generals and resulting in the deaths of tens of thousands of elite Tibetan cavalry, if this could not attract the notice of the kingdoms of the western regions, then nothing could. Flap, flap, countless messenger birds flew to and fro over the western regions, as if this news about the battle was sprouting wings and swiftly spreading to every corner. The Anxi Protectorate headquarters also received this news. Gao Xianji, holding the letter, creased his brow in silent thought. The border between Yusang and the Great Tang was extremely long, and so it was not only Qixi that suffered from Tibetan raids and invasions. The Anxi Protectorate was similarly afflicted. But whenever Yusang attacked the Anxi Protectorate, Gao Xianji would always throw them back. Gao Xianji didn't have many soldiers, but they were the cream of the crop, each of them able to fight against 100. In addition, the Anxi Protectorate army was extremely well equipped, armed with large ballistae with frightening killing potential. Thus, the Tibetans had always been wary about attacking him. Moreover, with Gao Xianji's current reputation in the western regions, many kingdoms would answer his call to arms. Other than the Great Tang's Anshi Protectorate army, Gao Xianji could also mobilize the soldiers belonging to the kingdoms of the western regions, and even the Tibetans had to think twice before testing that edge. Despite all this, Gao Xianji had never looked down on the Tibetan cavalry, especially when they were being led by an imperial great general. Chongqing, what do you think? Dusong Mangpoj isn't a weakling, and someone of Fuming Lingcha's abilities wouldn't be able to deal him such a severe defeat alone. There's something fishy about this matter. As Gao Xianji spoke, he handed the letter to Feng Chongqing. Feng Chongqing said nothing, and after glancing at the letter, he lowered his head and began to think. Only great generals can deal with great generals, and for the Yusang Empire's losses to be so severe, Dusong Mangpoj must have been forced to flee in utter defeat. Feng Chongqing raised his head and began to speak, his eyes clear and wise. For something like this to happen, the opposing side had to have at least 2 imperial great generals, and extremely formidable ones. Fuming Lingcha's situation clearly does not satisfy these requirements. But do the western regions have this many great generals in the first place? Or did Geshuhan and Ansishan also come over? Gao Xianji said. Haha, if it were my lord, perhaps they would have come. But they would never do so for Fuming Lingcha. He's always had a most irascible temperament, and he enjoys flaunting his age and seniority. Those two would never be able to stand such treatment. Moreover, they have to guard their own territory. They are great generals, and if they abandon their duties, they will be severely punished. Feng Chongqing smiled as he spoke. But if it wasn't them, who could it be? When did the western regions have so many experts? Gao Xianji sternly said. These words instantly caused Feng Chongqing's smile to vanish, and he could sense the gravity of the matter. Imperial great generals were incredibly important. They represented the most powerful fighting force in the world, and few could reach that level. Moreover, if it wasn't Geshuhan or Ansishan, it meant that there were unknown experts of the imperial great general level in the western regions. No, they might even be stronger than great generals. My lord, Dusong Mangpoj lost in the triangular gap on the northern edge of the plateau. If I remember correctly, that area leads to the city of steel constructed in Wuxiang by that youngest son of the Wang clan, Feng Chongqing pensively said. In addition, our scouts sent back news that a small-scale city of steel has been built on that triangular gap, and the youngest son of the Wang clan is currently there. It's impossible to deny that this matter is connected to him. Right now, the news that Fuming Lingcha had defeated Dusong Mangpoj on the northern edge of the plateau was being spread throughout the western regions. But Feng Chongqing felt that there was something off about this matter, that the situation wasn't as simple as what was being told to the outside world. Your meaning is that those 2 hidden imperial great generals were invited by that boy? Gao Xianji said with a frown. He had always placed extraordinary trust in Feng Chongqing's judgment. Although his subordinate was extremely ugly, he possessed a unique insight and a clear train of thought. He would often realize things that others often missed. This point had been proved countless times. But Gao Xianji still found it difficult to believe Feng Chongqing's conclusion that this matter was related to that scion of the Wang clan. It wasn't that he didn't trust in Feng Chongqing, but that this matter would be far too shocking. An imperial great general was an incredibly important individual, and someone who could defeat an imperial great general even more so. Not even if one scoured the entire Wang clan would one find such an individual, much less 2. Haha, my lord shouldn't be anxious. Fuming Lingcha definitely doesn't have the strength to beat Dusong Mangpoj so badly. Anyone with eyes can see that there's something strange going on. If Fuming Lingcha isn't hiding some sort of secret power, then it must be related to that Wang Chong. But whatever the case is, I feel that this matter is far from over. This news will definitely stir another wave in a few days if it's fast, half a month if it's slow. Feng Chongqing paused for a moment, then he smiled. If Fuming Lingcha has some hidden trick, then it's fine. We'll eventually dig up whatever he's hiding. But if it's that Wang Chong, if I remember correctly, he sent my lord a letter not too long ago. My lord's pursuits will end up intersecting with his more frequently in the future. After all, his fief is in the western regions. Has my lord ever considered how to interact with him? In addition, if this Wang Chong really does have such prodigious abilities that he can even defeat Dusong Mangpoj, then perhaps we should reconsider the advice he sent to us in his letter. With these final words, Feng Chongqing turned his head to look at his commander. Around half a month ago, Wang Chong had sent a letter concerning the Shi Kingdom. At the time, Gao Xianji and Feng Chongqing had basically dismissed the warning with a laugh. After all, a teenager telling a veteran imperial great general, the Anshi Protector General, what to do was simply ludicrous. But if Wang Chong was so capable that he could salvage the southwest, defeating Huashu Huizong, Daluan Ruozhen and Duan Gechuan, and then go to Qixi and rely on his own strength to defeat Dusong Mangpoj's tens of thousands of cavalry, and could even invite 2 experts above the great general level, then his opinion held a completely different weight. His age was no longer important. For a person of his abilities, every word he spoke was worth serious consideration. I still need to carefully consider this matter, Gao Xianji said with a frown. Haha. Is Milord considering whether to have a face-to-face meeting with him? Feng Chongqing gave a faint smile and added, wouldn't this clear everything up? Major officials of the border, protector generals of the empire, could not lightly leave their garrisons. Moreover, Gao Xianji and Wang Chong still had grudges from the regional commander's incident. In the past, Gao Xianji would have immediately denied this idea, even teased and ridiculed Feng Chongqing a little. But this time, Gao Xianji did not shake his head and deny it. Milord! Feng Chongqing couldn't hide the surprise in his eyes. He had just been joking. But the look on Gao Xianji's face told him that this was actually a course of action under serious consideration. The hall was momentarily silent. Neither of the pair saying a word. Putting aside the western regions for now, at this very moment, the main hall of the Qixi Protectorate headquarters was brightly lit. What have you found? A thunderous voice echoed through the hall, suffused with great solemnity. Fuming Lingcha's muscular figure was like a lion, pacing back and forth within the hall, his hands held behind his back, the fire of the torches casting his long shadow against the ground. The shadow was constantly flickering, reflecting its owner's emotions. The battle at the triangular gap had concluded, and though the matters of the daytime had concluded, Fuming Lingcha found himself facing an even more important choice. Yes, milord. A Qixi Protectorate officer wearing a full suit of armor, a long and thin sword hanging from his waist, deferentially kneeled on the floor and reported. We've already searched the plateau but were unable to find Dian Mangban's body. In addition, we interrogated the captured Tibetans and even found someone proficient in Tibetan to speak with them. They all said that they noticed Dian Mangban charging into the city, but after that, the army collapsed and the situation becomes unclear. We've also sent people to the plateau to inquire on any news, but the plateau is vast, and the Tibetans do not like speaking with outsiders, so gathering any news will take many days. Finally, the northern region of Yusang is currently in complete chaos. All the herdsmen have retreated several hundred li in fear, and some of them have even withdrawn all the way to the royal capital, making information even more difficult to gather. How could it be like this? Fuming Lingcha continued to pace around the hall, his brow deeply furrowed. Dian Mangban was the Azura war god of Yusang, an imperial brigadier general, and one of the commanders of this operation, and yet it was impossible to determine whether he was dead or alive. Even more strange was that though Fuming Lingcha had sent people into that steel fortress, they had failed to find his body. Fuming Lingcha currently couldn't determine whether he was alive or dead. I was too careless. If I knew this was going to happen, I would have never withdrawn so far. Fuming Lingcha clenched his fists and mentally cursed. Dusong Mangpoj and Dian Mangban were at a level where if they wanted to escape, they could move with incredible speeds. Even though Fuming Lingcha was an imperial great general, he still wouldn't be able to catch them. This was also why Fuming Lingcha was still so confused and unable to determine whether Dian Mangban was dead or alive. Milord, should I still submit a report of your exploits to the imperial court? A Hu deputy with hawkish eyes said. It would be fine if Dian Mangban was still alive, but if he died in battle and we can't find his corpse, it will be a significant problem for us in the future. But if we delay the report for too long, even just a few days, this unusual situation on the border will definitely attract the imperial court's notice. If they send troops to Qixi to inspect the battlefield, we'll have an even bigger problem on our hands. After all, the military has made it a rule that once a battle is concluded, a report on the exploits and contributions of the soldiers should be noted on the same day. In addition, if there are any particularly significant contributions, the report should be immediately sent to the imperial court. A defiance of these rules will attract a great deal of suspicion. From the moment the battle had ended in the daytime, the Protectorate's forces had been seeking any news on Dian Mangban, and now night had fallen, yet no report had been submitted. This was incredibly dangerous. Report it! Fuming Lingcha clenched his fists, an intimidating light in his eyes as he finally made his decision. Just draft a memorial telling the court about the battle at the Triangular Gap. There's no need to worry about Dian Mangban for now. In the future, if the Imperial Court really does begin to investigate, there will be no doubting the fact that our Qixi Protectorate army had a large-scale mobilization and defeated Dusong Mangpoj, killing tens of thousands of Tibetans. This is an absolute truth, and not even the Imperial Court will be able to find anything strange about it. I'd just like to see what sort of problem would come up, and just what sort of person would dare to oppose me. In his many years in Qixi, rushing east and west to fend off Yusang and the Western Turkic Khaganate, Fuming Lingcha was constantly plagued by troubles, and it had been many years since he had been able to perform any exploits on the battlefield. The recent death of Pulin he had even caused him to suffer the questioning of the imperial censors. The battle at the Triangular Gap and the defeat of Dusong Mangpoj were far too important to Fuming Lingcha, and the deaths of the 5,000 white braves even more so. Fuming Lingcha had spent far too many years in the barren lands of Qixi, so long that he had forgotten that he had once been the Anxi Protector General, the logistics commander who had been able to smoothly transport rations, goods, and soldiers. What had truly awakened Fuming Lingcha from his stupor was that Xianxia Jianxiong, after almost 20 years of stewardship in the southwest, had successfully entered the capital and become Minister of War. This news was like a sudden rap to the head. Xianxia Jianxiong's situation had been very similar to his. Both had spent many years on the border, but neither had much to show for it. But Xianxia Jianxiong had still succeeded in becoming Minister of War. If Xianxia Jianxiong could do it, why couldn't he? On that day, the long-extinguished flames of ambition began to burn within Fuming Lingcha once more. The battle at the Triangular Gap was a rare opportunity that he could never let go. The messenger quickly left the hall. The clerk quickly drafted the memorial, and finally, a messenger bird soared into the air, flying toward the capital. Lord Marquis possesses divine foresight. The Qixi Protectorate was brightly lit until the third quarter of the Z period, upon which a messenger bird flew off in the direction of the capital. Not long after Fuming Lingcha made his decision, a scout quickly rushed away from the Qixi Protectorate headquarters and into Wang Chong's residence. After the battle at the Triangular Gap, Wang Chong had dispatched soldiers to keep an eye on the Qixi Protectorate. Just like how Fuming Lingcha had sent people to keep a close eye on Wang Chong had sent people to carefully observe Fuming Lingcha's movements. Lord Marquis, as expected, Fuming Lingcha couldn't restrain himself. A chorus of laughter echoed through the room. Upon hearing the scout's report, Su Kai turned to look at Wang Chong, an unsurprised look on his face. The City of Steel had been just as brightly lit as the Qixi Protectorate. Li Sai, Su Shixian, Chang Sanyuan, and all the other officers under Wang Chong's command had gathered to silently wait for movement from the Qixi Protectorate. I understand. You're dismissed. Wang Chong lightly waved his hand to have the scout withdraw. Lord Marquis, Fuming Lingcha has already moved. Should we move as well and send Dian Mangban's head to the imperial court to give him a surprise? Chang Sanyuan inquired. Dian Mangban's corpse had already been packed in a chest and secretly transported back. This was a crucial piece of evidence, and as long as it was turned over to the imperial court, it would definitely give Fuming Lingcha a big surprise. There's no need. Wang Chong grinned and waved his hand to reject Chang Sanyuan's suggestion. Fuming Lingcha is a crafty fellow. Whether it's when he let Dian Mangban through his defenses or stole the credit from us on the plateau, he always has the proper excuses. Even if we report this matter to the imperial court, He would only be charged with giving a false report and taking credit for himself. This isn't enough to deal him a lethal blow. On the other hand, once this matter is exposed, Fuming Lingcha will feel humiliated, and then his humiliation will turn into rage. He'll throw everything aside and crazily try to get revenge. In the end, we would just end up overshooting and bring more trouble to ourselves. Ah! The officers all glanced at each other, momentarily speechless. Lord Marquis means that we should be patient for now, Li Sai suddenly said. But if we do so, then Fuming Lingcha might become even more insatiable, which is certainly not a good result for us. That's right. General Li's words are reasonable. The officers all voiced their agreement. Fuming Lingcha had too high of a status, and between moving against him and not, both choices were wrong. Moreover, that he dared to so brazenly snatch the credit for the victory in front of them showed that he had no scruples. There was no telling what he would do next. Ha! Fuming Lingcha will have to be dealt with, but not through some minor itch like a lack of evidence for his reports to the court. Everyone relax. I have everything planned out. If everything goes as expected, Fuming Lingcha will be completely removed from his place as Qixi Protector General in less than a month. Wang Chong indifferently said. These understated words were like explosions at the ears of these officers. All of them trembled, their eyes widening as they turned to Wang Chong in shock. Protector Generals and Great Generals were not ordinary individuals, and it was definitely not an easy task to shift these people from their positions. That Wang Chong could so simply determine the fate of an Imperial Great General was a massive shock to these officers. Anyone who heard him would find these words difficult to believe, but deep within their hearts, these officers believed that Wang Chong really could pull it off. Wang Chong had already done far too many miraculous things. When everyone else was claiming that it was impossible, Wang Chong was single-handedly making it into reality. Wang Chong only smiled at these stares, giving no further explanation. Fuming Lingcha's presence in Qixi was now of dubious worth. He showed little initiative and was liable to hinder Wang Chong in many aspects. His desire for material gain meant that he would rarely put the interests of the Great Tang first, and in the future Battle of Talas, he was certain to be a massive obstacle. For the sake of the Great Tang, the soldiers of the Anxi Protectorate Army, and the soldiers of Qixi, Wang Chong had to remove him from the position of Qixi Protector General. But he said none of this to his subordinates. Xianxia, how is the matter that I asked you about? Wang Chong turned to the corner of the hall, where Xianxia had been lurking in the shadows. On his shoulder was that small but fierce rock eagle, its eyes exuding a searing light. Wang Chong's words quickly made Xianxia the focus of attention. Replying to Lord Marquis, everything is ready. We are following the target according to Lord Marquis's orders. Xianxia walked out of the gloom, pressing his right hand against his chest as he bowed. The officers looked at each other, confused as to what Wang Chong and Xianxia were talking about. This youth from the capital had studied under Old Eagle for 7 or 8 years and had arrived with a tender and immature face. But after the baptism of 2 battles, Xianxia was now much more mature and steady, his childish face appearing a little more weathered, a little more reliable. Remember to not expose yourselves. Do everything according to my orders. Wang Chong indifferently said. This subordinate understands. Xianxia bowed again and quickly left, vanishing into the darkness. The Tibetans won't be able to threaten Qixi for a short time, so I should begin on the other matter. Wang Chong looked forward, his mind abuzz with countless thoughts. The matter of the triangular gap coupled with that one future incident would decide Fuming Lingcha's fate, probably toppling him from his position. He just simply needed to wait a little longer. In comparison, this other matter was far more urgent. Sukai, I have a silk bag here. I've written down all the orders and put them within. Just do as they say and finish this matter as quickly as possible. As Wang Chong spoke, he thrust his right hand into his sleeve and removed a green silk bag. Yes, Lord Marquis. Sukai took the bag and immediately left. After the southwest, Zhangzheng, and the triangular gap, the officers had branded the image of the farsighted and invincible Wang Chong deep into their minds. No matter what Wang Chong said or what order he gave, they would immediately obey and carry it out to the utmost. Around 700 or 800 kilometers to the southwest of Wuxiang were mountains, a land of lush forests and precipitous cliffs. There were no roads here, yet starting from 2 months ago, more than 100 people had traversed the area, cutting down thorns and brambles as they ventured deep into the mountains. No one knew what they were up to, only that they had spent more than a month opening up a path through the mountains. And then they had begun to dig as if searching for something. Everyone, work hard. Lord Marquis has decreed that if we can find that Lu or everyone will be richly rewarded. From that moment onward, all of you will be able to drink and eat as you please. This is a rare opportunity that might not even come up once in 1,000 years. Don't be discouraged. Don't be dejected. If Lord Marquis says it's here, then it must be here. Those of you who participated in the War of the Southwest know that Lord Marquis has always been a godlike figure. He has never lied. If everyone works well, Lord Marquis definitely won't let you down. A 30-some-year-old supervisor was standing on a large rock, his booming voice ringing through the mountains as he exhorted the workers. "My lord." As the digging continued, a panicked voice came from outside. A bare-chested man of some 30 years ran toward the supervisor, almost tripping over himself in his haste. "There are lots of people outside. You need to go and take a look." "What?" The astonished supervisor quickly jumped down from the rock. "Just what nonsense are you babbling? There's no one but us in this place." "My lord, I'm not lying. Go and see for yourself." The bare-chested man had a panicked expression. Meanwhile, their conversation had quickly attracted the attention of all the other workers. A few moments later, there was a thunderous rumbling and a cloud of dust as horsemen began to ride up the road these workers had opened up. The supervisor felt suffocated as he looked at the massive cloud of dust. From the rumbling of the hooves and the size of the dust cloud, there were at least 1,000 people in this group of outsiders. Just who are these people? There's no one else in these mountains but us. Could it be some nearby group of bandits? This was the first idea that came to the alarmed supervisor. Bandits and brigands were the tyrants of the Silk Road to the west, and if someone had appeared here, there was an 80 to 90% chance that they were bandits from a nearby mountain. Could it be that we made too much of a stir and attracted these bandits? The supervisor's mind was overcome with his worries. "Lei Peng." At this moment, a thunderous voice rose from the cloud of dust. As the confused supervisor was still trying to understand what was going on, a muscular and swarthy hand clutching a token was thrust out of the cloud of dust. Yes, Lei Peng was flabbergasted, but he immediately recognized the token. Only one person in all of the Great Tang would use this token. But why did Lord Marquis send them over? It's not the appointed time yet. Despite his questions, Lei Peng was now much more relaxed. The battle on the western lines has concluded. Lord Marquis has decreed that the mining of the Lu or should be hastened. As the dust settled, an armored horseman rode out. His expression was grim, and a mustache sat atop his lips. He appeared to have some status, and as more and more figures continued to ride up behind him, one could see that he truly did have more than 1,000 people with him. "But we've been digging for more than a month now, and still haven't found any Lu or, isn't it a little too much to begin expanding the workforce? What if it could just be wasting manpower and resources, and we would be greatly disappointing Lord Marquis?" Lei Peng was a little nervous. Although he had been encouraging the workers this entire time, he really didn't know if this Lu or the Marquis spoke of actually existed. These mountains were thick with greenery, and nobody knew which of these mountains actually had this Lu or perhaps if the entire range had no Lu or at all. If that really was the case, then wouldn't they have just wasted their time? Lord Marquis says that there is, so there must be. There is no need to say anything else. The leader of these horsemen was as swift and decisive as a bolt of lightning. As soon as he spoke, he waved behind him, ordering the men behind to dismount. His subordinates immediately began to unpack their picks, shovels, and other mining tools, and stride over, quickly adding their numbers to the workforce. A hint of helplessness flashed in Lei Peng's eyes as he rejoined the workers. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Just when Lei Peng had given up all hope, on the 4th day, A part of the mountain collapsed in a thunderous rumble, after which cries of joy filled the air. Found it! Found it! We really found Lord Marquis Lu, or... Ha ha ha! An old miner held up a large chunk of ashen white ore with both hands as he excitedly shouted. Although the people of this era mistakenly called aluminum or Lu or Wang Chong had still succeeded in using his memories to find this treasure hidden deep within the mountains. If one's field of vision were pulled high into the sky to look down from incredible heights, one would realize that this was far from the only mining team. In other places along the Silk Road, to the southeast and southwest, Wang Chong had also dispatched teams. Moreover, after the Battle of the Triangular Gap had concluded, he had increased the size of each team by 10 times. With this increase in mining activity and the ensuing discovery of aluminum ore, those great clans that Wang clan had allied with swiftly began to display their strength. Cart after cart of aluminum was extracted from these various areas and transported back to the capital. Within the capital, all the matters regarding aluminum were under the purview of a single person. "My lord, this is the 1000th carriage of Lu or we've received today." On the eastern outskirts of the capital, by the Silk Road leading to the west, a guard dressed in blue was standing next to Zhao Jingdian, watching as the carriages of Lu or drove past. Behind them were countless buildings made of crude brick. There was no furniture in these buildings, only endless piles of Lu ore. In the Great Tang, all iron and copper ore was sought after by the great clans, the sword shops and the blacksmiths. But nobody knew what to do with this brand new Lu ore. Although many people regarded it as worthless, it was extremely valuable to Wang Chong, a fact which no one could dispute. And though the great clans still had their objections to Wang Chong's plan, the costs for this Lu ore and the lime were extremely low. To these clans, their losses on this investment would be extremely limited, and if they had gambled right, they would stand to receive endless benefits from Wang Chong. This was the true reason they had been willing to invest in this venture. The amount we've received in this period is simply too much. It seems like Lord Marquis at Wuxiang has begun to work. Another exceptionally quick-witted guard noted, his expression ecstatic. Zhao Jingdian slightly raised his head and said, The two of you have reacted rather quickly. I only got the news a few days ago that Lord Marquis defeated Dusong Mangpoj and the Tibetans on the plateau, eliminating the threat from the west. Qixi should be free of any danger for the time being, so Lord Marquis has ordered us to pick up the pace. Zhao Jingdian had not accompanied Wang Chong to Wuxiang, because Wang Chong had given him an even more important mission. This lime, clay, sand, and gravel all appeared like extremely worthless things that the nobles of the capital wouldn't even glance at. But Zhao Jingdian knew that Wang Chong viewed these objects with unprecedented importance. This was why Zhao Jingdian had remained behind. Have the masons in the rear progressed any further on the slurry mixtures? Zhao Jingdian asked, continuing to look in the direction of Qixi. All the most experienced masons have been working night and day to adjust the mixtures, and they've finally gotten some results, the guard to the left reported. The newest mixture of slurry can resist the full-strength strike of a true martial expert after hardening, but Master Kong believes that the toughness of the mixture can be further increased. He claims that the ideal mixture should be able to resist the full-strength blow of a profound martial expert. In addition, several of the Master Masons believe that Lord Marquis' suggestion of adding iron bars into the slurry before hardening is very reasonable, the other guard added. And they've also proposed that before adding the iron bars in, we could affix a few simple toughening or defensive inscriptions onto them, further toughening the slurry and increasing the amount of strength it can endure. Unlike the world Wang Chong had come from, this world had many kinds of inscriptions, which meant that Wang Chong had probably underestimated the toughness his cement could reach. Wang Chong could have never predicted this. It's about time. We can't delay, Lord Marquis. Inform the clans of the capital that it's time for them to comply with their contracts and put forward the money and manpower. After waiting for so long, they're probably even more in a rush than we are, Zhao Jingdian said, his hands held behind his back. In the days since Wang Chong had left for Wuxiang, countless people from the great clans had come with all kinds of excuses to inquire as to what was going on. This was a grand clan of ministers and generals supported by King Song, so no one believed that Wang Chong was trying to deceive them. But since they knew about this plan and Wang Chong wasn't willing to tell them, the great clans couldn't help but be worried. Bang! Zhao Jingdian's voice was like a peal of thunder exploding within the capital, stirring countless waves. The great clans and wealthy houses began to come to life like sharks that had smelled blood. Countless men and resources began to mobilize, immediately stirring up a storm in the Central Plains.